And so we are going to turn to our final panelist, Brandon, Dr. Waddles. It's so great to have you here today. And I'm going to start. My first question is, what got you into composing?
Oh my goodness. First of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you for inviting me into this space. Composing, I think I tried my first hand at it when I was in high school, which is actually where I started singing, I guess you could say formally in a choral situation. I was very fortunate to have surrounding me younger, well, they were older than me, but younger African-American composer arrangers, such as Stacey Gibbs, who is one of the nation's foremost in the arranging of the Negro spiritual. He, around that time, was just starting to write. And I was fortunate to be able to sit at the piano with him when he was first arranging, creating some of the things that we all sing today. He and Damon Dandridge were students of the same high school choral teacher, Nina Scott. And so I was just impressed upon to kind of take my hand at it. However successful or unsuccessful that was at the time. I would say that it became more of a serious thing for me when I attended Morehouse College for my bachelor's. Morehouse College is a historically Black college in Atlanta, Georgia. Some of you all may know alumni such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Spike Lee, Maynard Jackson, the first Black mayor of Atlanta, and that list goes on and on. But I'm very grateful for mentors of mine, such as Dr. Uzzy Brown, Dr. David Edward Morrow, who are wonderful composers and educators on Black sacred music in their own right. And so I had my first published piece there for, which was for the Glee Club, the Morehouse College Glee Club. And it went on from there. I think that my foray into Black sacred music in general probably became more intense and increased actually when I did my master's at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey. And I'm so grateful for mentors such as Joe Miller, James Jordan, Amanda Quist, Steve Pilkington, who supported me in this effort to continue to work in a published sense, not only with Black sacred music, but a number of different compositional vehicles, although housed within the choral space. And then, of course, that continued on after my master's as I taught there for some years, and then on with Dr. Andre Thomas at Florida State University, who really served as a great, and still serves as a great mentor and champion of my work. I'm grateful for a lot of wonderful people like Arianne and Noah and Jeff Duma at Yale and all of those, Gary Graydon, who continue to be supportive of me in that right, especially in commission type processes such as these. There might be a question about that later, so I don't want to get into your job here, but that's my start.
Oh, thanks, Brandon. And you know, it's clear that you have a lot of interests and a lot of things that have inspired you. If you had 3 minutes to share the most important things about Thomas Whitfield, what would you say?
Thomas Whitfield, as a start, is the subject of my doctoral dissertation at Florida State University. Thomas Whitfield hailed from Detroit, Michigan, where I'm a native and I teach and work now. He is certainly in the larger spectrum, sort of an unsung hero of Black gospel music, but those who are very closely knit within the industry know that he is one of the founding and most integral and most impressing vehicles for contemporary Black gospel music. He created this sort of oral aesthetic known as the Whitfield sound that has, I will say, colored the sound of gospel music beyond him with figures like Kurt Franklin, Donald Lawrence, Kurt Carr, a number of very prominent industry figures in Black gospel music today. He lived a brief but very potent life. He died at the age of 38, 39, died tragically in 1992. But the work that he did over a very short period of time has left us with not only a very powerful repertoire of songs, but in general a framework for the way in which gospel music has led forth over the past 30, almost 40 years since his passing. And so I have taken it upon myself, and I'm so grateful again for Dr. Andre Thomas at Florida State. He was my major advisor and supported my work in that doctoral dissertation. I thank him for supporting me in that right. I'm actually working on a biography and a musical analysis of Thomas Whitfield at this time, which I believe will be the first that is of its sort, at least about any contemporary gospel music.
It just strikes me that, that the parallels here with another, David Ruggles died at about the same age, and to have such promise cut short across the centuries, it's striking. So I look forward to seeing that come out, and let me know so that we can get a copy for the library.
Yes, thank you.
So let's talk about the song that gave us the inspiration for this webinar. What inspired you as you composed The Beauty of Color?
Well, let me start with this, and so I'm glad that I did not go into this until you asked later on. I believe that commission processes can either be on one extreme or the other, and they can either be very collaborative or they can be hell. Just to be very frank with you, I am so grateful that this landed on the very positive extreme. I'm very grateful for Britt, my friend. I don't think that I've ever had anyone in a commissioning process who has been, what will I say, so forthright and so helpful in sort of leading this creative conversation. And the information that he gave me concerning Ruggles, concerning the Hutchin family singers, concerning some of the very same melodies, the text that I gathered to use in the midst of all of this, I'm very grateful for it. It starts out with this melody that the Hutchinson family singers used, but it is later attached to a text from William Cowper known as the Negro's Complaint. And as I further researched on persons like Ruggles, on people like William Cowper, and on groups such as the Hutchinson family singers, all of whom are white, but were very much staunch abolitionists, very much staunch anti-slavery. When I think about the Negro Complaint as created by a white abolitionist, and the text is taken in the perspective of an enslaved African, which is how we prefer to relate to them, not as slaves, but as enslaved Africans. I think of a quote that was used by Wynton Marsalis. Wynton Marsalis, for those who are not aware, is one of the most prominent jazz trumpeters and jazz educators in the nation. He was featured on a long-spanning documentary series on PBS about jazz by Ken Burns, which I hope that everybody will take in. But when he was talking about this period of time, specifically entertainment, even concerning like minstrelsy and blackface, he talked about the necessity of America's inward family conversation. America's inward family conversation. And when we talk about necessary but sometimes difficult family conversations, people that take on that conversational right might not be the person that you think that they would be necessarily. And when I think about America having to have difficult conversations about its past and even about its present as it relates to where they're headed in the future, I think that people like William Cowper and the Hutchinson Family Singers and David Ruggles and then they spoke for persons that or people that didn't necessarily have the resources or the access to speak as they needed to. And something like the Negro Complaint and the melody, which was attached from an old English ballad of sorts. I think it was very interesting for America to be having that conversation, for someone to bring about that conversation in a way that we did not expect it. And so that's the melody that I start out with. It has to be balanced out with what I call the mother of not only Black American music, but American music, being the Negro spiritual. And so I utilize Negro spiritual tunes and melodies like I Believe I'll Go Back Home, and even the melody from Dvorak's New World Symphony, one of the melodies, which is Going Home. And he, of course, Dvorak explains to us that these melodies, this entire catalog of repertory, is the foundation of America, or would be the foundation of American music, as he was inspired by the likes of Burleigh, Harriet T. Burleigh, and others. And so I use these melodies to intersperse and converse with the Negro Complaint. And then I bring in later on this idea of this chorale, the final chorale from the Bach St. Matthew Passion. And it's important for me to use that particular text because it is a conversation and a combination of the reality of the situation, which is not always so positive, but then it goes right into Ruhe sanfte Ruhe, which is rest gently, gently rest. And it talks about the hope that for me is hope of a more positive future. And that is the basis of not only Black American music, but American music. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, or if we're talking about James Brown, or if we're talking about Kendrick Lamar, we're gonna be all right. All of Black American music speaks to the reality of the present situation, but it also talks about the hope of something to come. And so Ruhe sanfte, sanfte Ruhe transitions us from the reality into this situation where the hope of the conversation that we're having together can tell us that the beauty of all of our colors will lead us to healing our present ache and our present solution. So I know that was a lot in a very condensed sort of time, and I could go on and on, but I hope that gives you a bit of entree into what you'll hear tomorrow.
No, that's amazing, and as a singer, I don't often have the chance to talk with or hear from the person who's created the pieces that I'm involved with, and so it's been fascinating for me to listen to. And I also just want to say, the experience of singing it, the way that you've woven all the things together, and all the references to other pieces and bringing it in, it resonates because it does call back to those pieces, and yet here it is here, and so it gives me that kind of just a universal feeling. And I really hope that the audience, when they get to hear this, not just tonight, but I'm sure it's going to get picked up and be popular around in other places, that the audience will get that same sense of the hope that you're trying to convey. So the last thing I'm going to ask you, Dr. Waddles, before we open up for questions is tell us about your next project. Or which one you want to pick. I'm sure you've got a lot of fires.
There's some really great things going on. I am headed to. So for those who are not aware, I work specifically in Black sacred music, but I also work in a number of different spaces. And I and Grammy Award-winning artist Lettucey will be headed to Carnegie Hall in 2 weeks in a concert series that will tribute the great Nina Simone. And we talk about potent figures in American music. Nina Simone, who was a classically trained pianist, but also a brilliant singer and songwriter, who was and just a very powerful figure in American culture. Lettucey has taken it upon herself to not only record a Grammy-nominated album called Lettucey Sings Nina, but we have been on a long-spanning series with a number of different orchestras, including Philadelphia Orchestra and Cleveland and Cincinnati and even in Stockholm. And we will be kind of completing that tour at Carnegie Hall on February 23rd. So that's the next big project. I have another one with Harvard Glee Club, as they will be heading on, I believe it is their first European tour since 1921. Yeah, it's been a long time. So they will be heading out to Europe at the beginning of next year, and I have been commissioned to interesting, right, settings of the Magnificat and the Nunc Dimittis for them as they head over across the pond, as we would say. So those are two of the larger things coming up. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that's great. I mean, what a wonderful way to kind of take back to the other side of the pond. You know, well, this is what we have done with that, and to feature your work. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their thoughts with us so far today. We do have some time now where if there are questions from our audience, we've set aside some time for that. And so unfortunately, Arianne had to leave because department meetings, you know, in academia, they rule the world, and they take priority over anything else. But we still have Brandon and Steve with us. And so if you have questions for either of them, you could either put the question in the chat, or if you want to use the raise hand function, I can even call on you and you could even speak, because that's the beauty of technology. Britt, I see that you've got a question.
Thanks, everyone. This has been wonderful. And Martin, you are certainly the best moderator we could hope for. So thanks so much for all you've done. Brandon, you are full of the spirit, and hearing you describe this project was so inspiring. And it just makes me wonder, I know there's some thought of adding some orchestration, but it seems like there's a lot of interesting historical material here. I mean, hearing about Steve saying that Frederick Douglass was stoned when he first spoke in Northampton, but he spoke truth, powerful truth to everyone. I just wonder, would you ever think about making this bigger, doing more of this? You know, sort of, I don't know, kind of operatic or oratorio kind of thing. I don't know. It's a lot there.
Yeah.
Maybe we can funny.
Yeah, you know what? This is very interesting. Steve, I thoroughly enjoyed it. If I had not, I always say, if I had not gone into music as a career, I would have been a historian. And so I am a huge kid and nerd when I'm sitting back and listening to all of that. So I appreciate it. I have been in conversation about a lot of larger spanning projects, whether it be in oratorio or even operatic format. One of the things that I have been concerning myself with is the work of James Baldwin. He of course was just not only a great literary figure, but an amazing spokesperson on the realities of American culture and society. And I've been thinking about weaving that into the course of like a church service, and the various points of the church service would be orchestrated as movements. And you know, as I was thinking about this particular work, how that might weave its way into something like that, to use both this and Baldwin's writings as part of a I want to say fabricated, but a simulated church service of sorts. I think church service can be a great communal space, and when I talk about conversation, it is exactly that. There's so much conversation that happens in church that isn't necessarily audible. Hi, hello, how are you doing? But it's also the musical moments. It's also the performative nature. Sometimes it doesn't even demand actual speech. It just it just mandates a look sometimes. And I want to I don't know, I think I could peer into that a lot with these two ideas that have been brewing in my head. I love that idea, Britt. We've got to talk about it more.
Yeah,
You were my muse.
I love it. And of course, that most of the great choral music before, I don't know, Romantic era was in church services. So to bring it back to a church service, but expand it by, as you say, bringing the music that is unique to our nation, which is, so important to our history, into it, just strikes me as really a beautiful combination. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And I would just observe, as you may know, Brandon, that James Baldwin was on the faculty of the 5 colleges in his later years and was actually teaching around here. And so we have another connection to the Valley, and so if we were trying to weave this all together, it certainly seems like this kind of piece ought to be premiered somewhere around here. So perhaps we'll have to talk some more about that. Are there other questions from our audience members who've been hanging out with us and listening to this wonderful discussion? So Brandon, I'm going to ask you a question, and probably my closing one here. What would you say, what is it about choral music that makes it an effective medium for exploring difficult subjects? Everyone, as people heard about, we're talking about, the dying match girl, and we're talking about the death and challenges, and of course, spirituals are born of a certain kind of pain, right? So what is it about choral music that lets you explore these things?
I would wager that even beyond the music, it is the choral experience. One of the things Arianne talked about was at the beginning, was that bringing herself into the choral experience helped her to become less insecure about, any hardships that physical deformity or whatnot. And for myself, a lot of my colleagues that work in the choral space, it wasn't always singing the songs. It was just being with like-minded people, like-hearted people. Those experiences literally saved our lives. I don't think there's any more prominent time. There was any more prominent time for choral music than in the point where we felt that we could not sing together, and that was the last 2.5 years of the pandemic. And while we may have lost numbers, one of my dear friends, Dr. Brandon Boyd, who's at University of Missouri, he told me before we started in fall of 2020, many of us, in fact, that was my first semester teaching at Wayne State, was fall of 2020, which was a completely virtual experience. So you can imagine going into and preparing for choral rehearsals, and it was wild. But he said, we're going to have to be more concerned about process rather than product. And process means dealing with the necessary conversations around the music that we're singing, and not just plucking out notes and tarrying through rhythms to prepare for a 45 to an hour and a half concert. What about the music has gathered us here together? And when choral experiences are at their most potent and powerful, it is when we are able to gather together and have those necessary family conversations, when we're able to commune with each other. And so there's something about rubbing next to your best buddy, your singing mate next to you, and being able to have that moment of full synergy. There's nothing like that first choral big breath before you get into whether it be the Hallelujah chorus, whether it be the opening strains of the Bach B minor Mass, or whether it's in one of Moses Hogan's universal spiritual settings. It all happens the same way, but there are conversations, and there are necessary conversations that have to go into each and every one of those pieces before we can make it live. Yeah, we got to get off the score. Yeah, because I talked a lot during the pandemic about there being a human in every score. And so whether the human is the enslaved African or the collective of enslaved Africans, the invisible church, or whether it's finding yourself in Bach, or whether it's finding yourself, what was I listening to yesterday? Oh my goodness, Schubert, Winterreise. I have to find myself in Der Leiermann or Gute Nacht, and all of those. I have to find my humanity, with Goethe, with Schumann, with the poet. Yeah, I think that it's that. And when we're all able to find ourselves within that human experience, that very connective human experience, that's the real power of choral music. Yeah.
Preaching to the choir,
Yeah.
right? But as someone who's sung in choirs for over 40 years and had to do that little gap with the pandemic, it's just so great to be back. And so I want to thank everybody for participating in today's discussion, both our audience and especially our panelists, Brandon and Steve and Arianne. And I want to, if you have that desire to feel like you're going to be brought in by the music of, let's say, Schütz or Lang, or even, dare I say, Waddles, you have an opportunity to do that tomorrow night. If you want to come and listen to the world premiere of The Beauty of Color, you can come hear us in concert tomorrow night at Abbey Chapel at the Mount Holyoke campus. Tickets are available online at our website, and there's a link in the chat. Thanks for spending your Friday morning with us. We hope to see you at the concert, and thanks again for your interest in the topic.